It's time for AggroChat, the official podcast of the Tales of the Aggronaut blog and stalwart gaming community, where we talk about stuff and things, and the stuff about the things, and sometimes gaming. I'm Belgast, and let's start the show. Hey folks, it's that time again, time for another episode of AggroChat. This is episode 284. Tonight I'm joined by Ammo.
Hello.
Ashgar.
Greetings from Texas.
Kodra.
Hi.
Tam.
Snow's bad.
Valen.
Hello.
So, yeah, I am jealous that Ash is at Pax South. So,
Ditto.
You guys could come.
Yet again, it didn't line up very well. Like in my case, like my wife is leaving the country in a week, so I am assisting with preparations for her leaving the country in a week.
Now, my end this weekend has been so far full of last minute changes before a code freeze, so it's been busy.
Sounds busy.
But since the last show, and I think we like kind of kicked around talking about it, Awesome Games Done Quick happened.
Which means there's a lot of VODs you can catch up on.
Including a Metroid run of a ROM hack intended to not be playable by humans.
Okay.
They closed the show with Super Metroid Impossible, which is a ridiculous ROM hack of Super Metroid.
What is significant that makes it Metroid Impossible?
There are a lot of gaps in places where there shouldn't be. A lot of power-ups got moved, so that instead of say the power bomb, you have a missile upgrade. So that's not useful. That doesn't get you anywhere new. And so it does sort of remove the non-linearity of Super Metroid, and it forces you into a very difficult path in which you need to do dumb things to actually finish the game.
And they were able to finish it, I take it?
Yep.
So is this like a randomizer run?
It's not random at all in that the things were placed in specific spots.
Okay.
It's just chosen to be difficult spots.
Lots and lots of weird skips required?
Somewhat. It's really cool and you should watch it. He explains a lot more of it while it's going on.
There any other really significant runs?
So, significant to me, Mohawk did a run of 100% glitchless for the letter V6 times, which I guess the community calls V6. I didn't even realize it. You can tell how connected in I am. But that's actually the category that I have a run of on speedrun.net. So I'm pretty excited about that.
There was a run of Eagle Island, which is a game I'd never heard of before this. And it looks like a really cool, somewhat randomized Metroidvania. I've actually seen it at PAX, but I didn't know it was out and it was playable. And that one was significant because he actually set a world record up there on stage.
Oh, nice. That's impressive.
I assume a good deal of money was raised.
Yeah, over $3 million.
Wow. That's impressive. So, this week, Ash, you're at Pax South. Anything
I am at Pax South.
Interesting that you've run across on the show floor, or anything of note that excites you?
I feel that it is somewhat of note that major publishers don't seem to come here anymore. Like, I haven't made a major publisher's game of note in some time, but like there are some studios in the Austin area, and not all of them come. So that means what there is to see is indie games and board games. The other thing I've noticed this year is that a lot of companies are showing off their recently released game rather than their upcoming games. And the rise of, like, I don't even know how to put this. I guess the best way to say it is small publishers. Because I guess if you have a publisher, you're not indie anymore. But Tiny Build is whatever. Like Tiny Build, Devolver, the publishers like that. But there were a number of interesting Metroidvania-like games, of which my favorite is probably Kunai.
Like the throwing weapon?
Exactly like the throwing weapon. Its thing is that you have basically a grappling hook. You have two of them. They're your kunai.
Sure.
It stars a robot with a screen for a face. So this screen makes interesting faces as you attack and get hit and do various motions. And is, I think, the most interesting of the indie Metroidvanias I saw at the show. It's also actually coming out soon-ish. I think it's got a date in February. Further down that list, though, is Foregone, which is coming out next year, sometime in 2021. Most notable for its very well done pixel art, which they did by making 3D models of things and then animating them and then doing pixel art of those animations.
Oh, interesting.
But that one's going to be notable more for its combat than anything else. And again, it's over a year away, so
how is the attendance of South?
it's still crowded.
Okay.
Like, I realized they didn't sell out of tickets, but it hasn't been felt on the show floor.
Like, did they also expand the show floor again?
Yeah, it's big. The original show floor, when they started, was in the old part of the building, and that's where True Dungeon is now. And so they have the very large part of the show floor now that they're using in the new section. On the board game front, Level 99 was there, and all I had to show was Exceed, because yesterday they released Season 4 of Exceed, so they were there with the Shovel Knight boxes, so I might have those now.
So how does Shovel Knight play?
Shovel Knight is not in this box, sort of. This box contains a Shovel Knight and Shield Knight combo fighter.
Aha.
Because Shovel Knight was already in Exceed.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, he has a playing style involving a lot of ranged special attacks that are the various items from the game.
Got it.
So the new one is a little different. It involves, like, combo teamwork. And then two games that sort of lead into a different discussion. There is Dungeon Defenders Awakened and Everspace 2, both of which are sequels to, well, okay, Dungeon Defenders is a popular game, Everspace not so much. But they are very different than the games that came before. Everspace is a roguelike spaceflight game in which you fly around the galaxy and try to beat the game before you get blown up. It is very difficult. I think I tried it and didn't like it all that much. Their new one is just a sort of open world-y type game with RPG elements. And so it's sort of the same sort of spaceflight engine, but a very different game behind it. But for Dungeon Defenders' case, this is calling it a remake of Dungeon Defenders 1 isn't correct, but it's a sequel that throws out everything about Dungeon Defenders 2. They wanted to make a new game with the Dungeon Defenders 1 heroes and the Dungeon Defenders 1 mechanics, and preferably not making the entire thing a free-to-play mess.
That sounds promising, because I liked the original Dungeon Defenders quite a bit.
Yeah, and it got me thinking about other games that, quite frankly, ignored their second entry, like the Prince of Persia Sands of Time trilogy and the Devil May Cry games make me think of this.
Monkey Island kind of did. The intro is basically like, yep, that was a thing that happened, and now you're floating in the ocean.
This is the second game's syndrome?
A little bit. Where they tried something new and different and it didn't work out. As opposed to Everspace 2, which is more like the Assassin's Creed syndrome, using the first game as a tech demo.
Well, I think it happens a lot with second games when the game studio maybe doesn't understand what part of the first game made it popular, and instead focused in on the wrong part to double down on.
Are you saying that Warrior Within took the wrong parts of Sands of Time?
Yes, I am. I'm really glad to hear that the attendance is still high, because, like, on some level I was concerned, because I had noticed the same thing you were talking about, to where, like, major publishers don't attend Pax South, just full stop. Did Capcom have a booth or anything like that?
Capcom did not have a booth.
Wow, because, like, that's been the one that was fairly reliable. Like, that one year they had, like, the giant Resident Evil house.
Yeah, and I think they had Monster Hunter stuff last year. But nope, they didn't. They don't seem to be on the floor this year.
I mean, to be truthful, like, I'm probably way more interested in talking to a bunch of indies than, like, seeing things I had already heard about from major publishers.
Yeah.
Also, you can actually talk to them.
That too.
Well, like, it's super charming to, like, go up to booths, like, on the indie devs and, like, sit down, play their game, and then see how freaking excited they are to, like, watch people playing their game. And especially on the tabletop stuff, like, they seemed to be super pumped when people were really into whatever they made.
I mean, the Dice Throne guys have expanded their booth every single year.
Yeah, I saw that they had the Dice Throne Adventures or whatever fully playable.
Yep. That's not even out yet.
Well, it only recently did a Kickstarter, I think. I don't know. Well, the deal that they cut with whoever is publishing it now seems to have improved their fidelity. I think they're with Roxley now. I have behind me some rather high quality boxes.
The difference between the Dice Throne Season 1 and Dice Throne Season 2 cards is stark.
So, is there a Dice Throne Season 3 coming?
There is Dice Throne Adventures coming, along with
Okay.
a remake of Dice Throne Season 1 to bring those characters up to the standards of Season 2.
That game's the most fun I've had with Yahtzee in a long time.
It's the best version of Yahtzee.
Anything else cool from the show?
There was a game that seemed to be explicitly for Grace called Mythic Ocean, which is a narrative game where you guide underwater creatures that are also gods to shape their personalities to determine what kind of world they're going to make.
Interesting.
That does sound pretty interesting.
So, underwater black and white?
Hopefully with less poop.
If Black and White were a visual novel, then sure. There's also the game that seems to be impossible for me to play on the show floor. It's called The Artful Escape, which is a music-based platformer with a ridiculous art style. Like, you should just pick a screen for this game to use as the background for the show because it's ridiculous. It's nonsense.
I'm looking at some of this. It looks very, very stylish.
So that's attracting a lot of attention, and as such, it's basically impossible to play because their line is always capped.
But, so is it a music game?
It appears to be a puzzle platformer where all the puzzles are music.
Okay. It's a statement you just read to me.
I think that's it for PAX, though.
Okay, cool. So this next discussion, I'm not exactly sure how to ease into it. I have long obsessed about Destiny lore, and I know one of the problems with Destiny is the fact that like all of the lore exists out of game. And they've gotten a little better about it, but like there's still wide swaths of the story that's happening in Destiny that just don't exist in game.
Mm-hmm.
There's a similarly related problem with Witcher, and I thought this would get better as I delved deeper into the back catalog of games. So
It's probably only going to get worse.
Witcher 3 just sort of like assumes you know a bunch of shit. And you're constantly put into situations where your character knows way the hell more than you do.
Did you play the first game?
I did not play the first game, but that doesn't
Okay.
actually help at all. And that's where we're getting. I have watched numerous really high quality summaries of the first game because the first game's control scheme is garbage, and I just cannot
It's true.
play
It is awful.
I just cannot. So, like, I've watched 3 or 4 really well-produced summaries of what happens in the first game. Also, I have played the second game now all the way through on one path, and I'm about halfway through on a different path. I thought this would help me understand bits about the Witcher setting, but no, it doesn't. And the reason it doesn't is I am also now reading the novel. And as I read the novels,
This means you're going to get conflicting information.
all of the missing bits of information that I had no clue where it's coming from come from the novel. I am meeting characters that I apparently knew in Witcher 3, but it's from a novel. Like that's the source of information that's missing from my vocabulary basically, is the novels. And like on one hand, I think it's really cool that they lovingly created this universe in a video game that is relatively closely related to the novels, but on the other hand, it's kind of the same problem that Destiny has, to where all of the information that you're confused about is scattered across 7 novels. But just like Destiny, because they've done this, it's made me obsessed with trying to fill in the details.
Because you're insane.
Yeah.
So I'm almost done with the second novel, which actually the first 2 novels in chronological order are just batches of short stories. The next one will be the actual beginning of proper novels. But yeah, like, so it's hilarious because the Witcher universe has had the exact same effect on me that Destiny did, and it has the exact same problem that Destiny did. And I have to say, like, playing through it, the second game feels way better to play through because it's still relying on the conceit from the first Witcher game that things happened and Geralt lost his memory and has amnesia. So when you encounter someone that knows Geralt, you can play the amnesia card and get them to explain who the hell they are. And by the time you reach the third game, Geralt now has his memory back. So that was the first one I played, and holy hell, are there a bunch of characters. There's like, okay, this is a person, and then they act hurt when you don't remember them, because you can also say like, I don't remember you, or you could just kind of roll with the punches and try and figure things out as you go. And I decided to do the try and figure things out as I go option, which led to some confusion. But now that I have read, a bit of the books, I've met a bunch of characters that I met while roaming around Witcher 3, and the interactions that I had with them now suddenly mean a hell of a lot more to me. So I revised my original advisement of just start with the third game, and I don't know. Like, I don't even know. Like, I think it's a better experience to start with the second game, because at least you'll get something from it, and it's a much more linear game.
Wait, second game is?
The second game is way more linear. Like, it is kind of following a path. There is a prologue, 3 chapters, and an epilogue. And at each step, you're given choices, and that will basically dictate what branch you follow for the next part. And so there's a minor decision that happens in the prologue. There's a major decision that happens in chapter 1, and chapter 1 dictates which chapter 2 you get, because and that's why I'm playing back through, is depending on what choice you made, you go to different areas of the world. Well, they're near each other, but like you're basically on 2 different sides of the same series of events. So you're interacting with totally different characters. And then chapter 3, as I understand, sort of loops back around to the same conflict. But again, there's supposedly a bunch of differences between the 2 sides. And then finally, your epilogue is dictated by the choices that you made all the way along the path. But I think it took me 14 hours to get through kind of a golden path playthrough of the game, really ignoring most of the side content, because the side content in Witcher 2 is largely a lot of fetch quests or kill quests. But yeah, I'm more or less revising that somebody should probably start with that game, because while the interface is a little dated, it is mostly fine. There's some weirdities that happen, but it's like no worse than going back and playing Dragon Age, the original. Like, the biggest problem I have is the fact that your attack button and your interact button are the same in mouse and keyboard, and if you are in combat at all, you can't interact with anything. Like, that's probably the worst issue, but like, I've encountered that in other games, so you can kind of just deal with it. But anyway, like, yeah, it's been interesting reading the novels, and they're rather good. Like, I'm enjoying them, but it's also been interesting reading the stories of the adventure in which I met these characters that knew me really well in Witcher 3. So another thing that's happened since the last show is, like, all of the games have been delayed. All of them.
Yep.
And honestly, like, I'm largely fine. I would love to think that this is going to reduce crunch, but I'm not that naive.
Yeah.
We already know it's not.
Yep.
But on the other hand, I would also like to think this means that maybe games will get time to be finished and polished before, like, I actually get to play them. And that's really what I'm hoping. Like the first part I would really love to happen, but the second part I would also really love to happen. So like Cyberpunk and Final Fantasy Remake and The Avengers and
I want like a
Doom Eternal, and
I want like a you know how food has like a certified fair trade label, or like a certified I don't know, organic or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I want a certified no crunch label on games.
Yeah.
Yeah, but would any games get that are made by somebody other than Insomniac?
Probably not.
I mean, I would I want to be cynical about it, but the Nintendo seal of quality really mattered. Like, hugely.
Well, I mean, in a Nintendo game is another one on this list that Animal Crossing was delayed significantly, specifically with the statement that they didn't want to invoke crunch, which definitely feels like, good guy Nintendo.
I mean, Nintendo is the only time I've heard of the CEO taking a pay cut when one of their products did badly.
Also that.
But it's like set up this weird situation where, like, I think I was reading the other day that, like, not much, if anything, is going to be releasing during the entire month of February.
Yeah, there's basically no games coming out in February. So we can actually get caught up on our backlogs.
Nice coming out in February.
Again, like, I have such a backlog that I would love to play through that, like, okay, I'm fine. I will play these things when they eventually come out.
I mean, I've got 5.5 Yakuza games to work my way through. I'll be fine.
I think they're actually coming out with a bundle of 3, 4, and 5.
That would be handy.
Since those are the ones without remakes.
Mm-hmm. And now that I actually own a Switch, I can play Fire Emblem.
The Switch is a really great console. So I like that brings up something else that came out this week is that Horizon Zero Dawn is going to be releasing on the PC, and there's talk of other PlayStation exclusives also releasing on the PC, which makes me reevaluate like my interest in consoles. Because like if there's a situation where games are coming out on the PC, then maybe the Switch is the only console that I'm interested in because like it's doing a thing that's different than the other ones are doing.
I think it'd be really interesting to have enough games that can be played equally well on console or PC that we can really lean into what one does better than the other and vice versa.
Yeah.
Because I don't know that I necessarily know what that is specifically, but like just in general, a different medium has different strengths, and like certainly some games are better on console or better on PC or whatever. But it'd be interesting to see like what are some things that you can do on a console that you can't do on a PC. What are some things that you can do on a PC that you can't do on a console?
There's a lot of games that I wouldn't have bounced off as fast on the console had I been able to play them with a competent mouse and keyboard scheme. And I specifically call out a competent mouse and keyboard scheme because like there are a lot of bad console ports that functionally have mouse and keyboard support, but that's really not what you want to do. I mean, I feel like Jedi Fallen Order is an example of that. Like you can play with a mouse and keyboard, but it doesn't feel as smooth as with a controller. So I forced myself to play with a controller. But given the choice, I will personally always want to play with a mouse and keyboard. I would love to enter a realm where crossplay is just a given, and you can just play on whatever platform of choice with control scheme of choice.
Yeah, I'm into it.
And I think that maybe becomes more realistic. Like if PlayStation Now becomes more of a thing, and Xbox or xCloud becomes more of a thing.
I just think that control schemes and input technology has gotten to the point where you don't have to worry about one control scheme or another being like just mechanically superior.
Well, and I think games have implemented things to basically even out the playing field.
Yeah,
because like on the PC, like I don't know if I'm playing with somebody with a controller or with a mouse and keyboard. And from what I can tell, like there's really not a whole lot of difference. I mean, games like Destiny specifically are pretty good at leveling that playing field. There is at least part of me that really hopes that xCloud gets a client that releases for the Switch.
That would be wild.
That would be amazing if you could essentially play the same games that you're playing on, the Windows platform, at least for Microsoft releases, on a Switch.
Oh, I see. I thought you meant the other way around, and I was like...
No, like a
why?
Microsoft client on the Switch, so that you could basically play xCloud on a Switch.
There are a fair number of games released on the Switch that are just streaming clients right now. Mostly in Japan, because infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not completely unreasonable.
I mean, the Switch really does mobility well. Even though I took away my Joy-Cons and put, like, giant controllers on instead, it's still mobile. And speaking of the Switch, there are a bunch of people playing Fire Emblem 3 Houses.
That's true. So, I've been playing this game a lot lately. I'm really having a lot of fun here.
Also, you picked the best house.
Did I? Is that what happened?
I mean, I think you did.
It sure feels like I picked a pretty good house.
They're all pretty good houses. Mechanically, anyway.
I had a lot of trouble with that part of the game, and I feel like it's part of the reason I haven't played a lot of it. Because I feel like there were 2 houses that are involved with the actual story of the game, and then there's Golden Deer. And I realize it's not actually true, but like when you start the game, there's clear conflict that's set up, and then Golden Deer.
It's funny because I think I agree with what you said, except for the very last part, which is there are 2 houses involved in the actual story of the game, and then there's Blue Lions.
I mean, sure, but like, but you don't have that perspective when you're selecting a house, because you select a house before you have basically any information.
Yeah, at the point you're selecting a house, it very much feels like, okay.
And like, I went with Black Eagles because I was like, I want to actually participate in what seems like the main thrust of the story of this game and not, third-party jollies, which is why I didn't select Golden Deer. And then, but I also feel like of the choice between Black Eagles and Blue Lions, there's a clear one. But like literally everybody I have talked to who played this game is like, oh, you selected the wrong house, which has killed my interest in continuing to play. And like, maybe I should start over, I guess.
I don't agree with that statement. Like, despite my disparaging of Blue Lions a second ago, all of the houses do have their own interesting thing going on.
I really think it's also a case of, like, whatever house you play the first might kind of end up being your favorite because you grow attached to the game and the characters most that way.
I was going to say, Emma, you've played this. You haven't played Golden Deer. What house did you start with?
I started with Blue Lions, and I tend to like them quite a bit. In my playthroughs, I recruit a lot of those characters again.
Okay.
But I also have friends who really love Golden Deer, so I'm like, okay, I will save that one for last and do the 2 Black Eagle related ones next. Well, actually, I've done one of them. I need to do the church route.
I mean, I've not started playing this, but I won't lie. I was like drawn to Blue Lions only because of Daggerfall.
I mean, it fits. Also, Blue Lions has some very talented students in that class.
Yes.
In what regard?
Strong names I'm thinking of are Felix. Felix is ridiculous. Ash is ridiculous. Who's the healer in that house? She's ridiculous.
Mercedes, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, Felix and Ash are always go-tos. When my husband started playing, I'm like, okay, you need to go recruit those guys first and use them all the time. And don't give Felix a battalion, at least not right away.
Does Felix not have charm?
He's got a passive that makes him better without a battalion.
Oh, interesting.
Also, get everybody on horses right away.
Not everyone needs a horse.
I think my husband is currently trying to make everybody a holy knight or a bow knight or...
I'm currently trying in that phase too. I'm near the time skip. I am level everyone's below level 25 right now. But I kind of want to talk about something in this game that I guess I've never played that many tactical games, but the ability to just press a button and see, okay, here is the options your opponents have available to you, really makes it satisfying to come up with plans and schemes and look at a battlefield ahead of time and sort of get an idea of, okay, how's this going to go? What are my objectives? Who do I need to be where in order to be able to solve these problems?
This reminds me of our discussion about tactics versus strategy from earlier.
Yeah.
Because you love strategy. What you're describing is strategy.
Yeah, I guess. I mean...
Is it really? I mean...
Is it?
Strategy
out of position and move your opponents in the middle of actual battles? That's more on the tactics side.
I mean, strategy is sort of looking at all of the pieces and building a large-scale plan to get there. versus tactics are what is happening right now and what can I do right now.
But this is the right now. Like that, this is the right now.
I mean, so there's definitely a little bit of strategy in the sense that I am trying to put pieces at the start of a battle so that they will be able to get to the right place at the right time. But there's definitely tactics of I need to be able to push my people up so that they stay out of attack range, and I push the right unit up to draw the enemy in.
I guess when I think of tactics, I think of an element of uncertainty that you have to deal with that cannot be overcome and will always exist. And removing that element of uncertainty pushes it more towards planning versus effective reaction.
I do sort of disagree with you that uncertainty and reaction. One of the things I like about Fire Emblem is that it tells you what your dice rolls are and what enemies' dice rolls are, or at least what they can be.
Yep. Yeah, it is, all of the information is available to me. This is kind of, so the conversation we were having earlier between Tam and I was around X-Wing. And one of the things that I really wish I could do in X-Wing is just know what are the available flight vectors for my ships and my opponent's ships. Like, where could they be? Where could I be? Like, what is the possibility space that I'm dealing with? Which is something that Fire Emblem definitely lets you do. Like, that's the feature. It shows you, like, how far each unit can move and how far each unit can attack.
Yeah. And perfect information sucks a lot of the fun out of it for me.
Yeah, like, I don't know. I just like to be able to know, and then I like that perfect information a lot, I guess is how I would say.
Yeah. I mean, different tastes. But like the other thing that I think about is I think about like data mining and MMOs and how much I liked it. I liked MMO, the experience more before data mining was big. And it's not exactly the same, but there's like the similar element where it's like, I like to be surprised. And if I can't be surprised, then there's a mathematically optimal strategy that I should just do. And maybe I can or can't achieve that because I'm either not good enough at math or not good enough at breaking down the, at understanding the information I'm looking at or whatever. But it exists. And at that point, me being surprised is a failure on my part.
Okay.
Whereas I really enjoy being surprised and having unexpected things happen to me and then reacting to those unexpected things in a competent way that gets me closer to my goals. But at the point where surprise is reduced to a failure on my part, then it's not really that anymore.
I mean, I feel like tangentially to this is like situations where we've gone in with an unoptimized group and still managed to pull it out because we were trying new strategies. And I mean, like that's kind of what you're talking about, isn't it, Tam? Where basically it's like you have a fixed set of abilities and you know what your character does, but like you don't maybe know what the enemy is going to do, and you're having to react to the situation on the ground. And the reaction is what makes the interaction feel novel and unique.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is, I guess maybe this is different for I mean, there is other elements of randomness in X-Wing, which would be the first thing. Like, there's the dice rolling mechanic. But I'm getting the feeling that that's not necessarily the vibe you're talking about.
I don't think I've ever been surprised by dice. Because the outcomes are always known. Where you land in the spectrum of outcomes isn't necessarily known ahead of time.
Okay, so dice is an element of randomness, but not surprise. I guess, like, this is where having a hand of cards is an element of surprise. I don't know that I necessarily agree that you need that element of surprise for it to be tactics.
Maybe. I know that games that don't have the capacity to surprise me, I generally find less fun. Unless there's well, I mean, even when there's a creative element, the creative element surprises me. So it's even there. Because yeah, like we were talking about Magic, and one of the, like, this Magic format obviously can't exist, but I would love a Magic format where you can't know what cards are in your or your opponent's decks until you start playing. Like, I would love it. It sounds great. That sounds like so much fun.
That sounds like the worst thing ever to me.
That sounds like Momir.
I mean, there's that, but
yeah, you can play Momir.
I
I
really
actually
enjoyed
love
Momir.
Momir.
I loved it.
But yeah, like I'm
the
with
idea
Ash.
of like making a deck and shaping it so that it has the cards I want in it is to me the most important part of Magic.
Yeah.
It's also why I thought Keyforge was something I never wanted to touch.
Well, that's why I say like it doesn't really work with Magic. And
But I
don't
mean,
think
like
it
in
could.
general, it's sort of, that's not something I'm interested in engaging with. Like, we just have different preferences there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, whereas in Magic, I like the idea of everybody playing with just absolute jank decks that don't make sense and seeing what happens.
You might want to pick up some boxes of the new mystery draft thing.
Yeah.
That sounds hilarious and fun to me.
I enjoy being surprised in play, and the more things remove that element, the more I tend to feel like the game becomes more of an exercise in pure optimization, and my success or failure in it is really just a matter of how much time did I spend crunching the numbers.
So you mentioned something earlier where it's like, if I have the perfect information, any mistakes I made, like, feels like they are my own mistakes and that I was just stupid. That's how I feel every time that I play a minis game. Especially, like, a game where it's like, oh, I put down a thing and, like, if I had known what I was doing, I clearly would have done something differently. But I just don't have the ability to know what this means, and so, whoops, I might as well be picking these dials at random.
I mean, I feel like there's also something to be said about doing your best with the cards that are dealt. Like, so say there's a scenario where you don't feel like you had enough information to lay it down, but you made a choice, and living with that choice also is kind of interesting.
Yeah. Because, like, yeah, sometimes it doesn't work out the way I was expecting, or sometimes I have to make a choice without complete information and see what happens, and then I see what happens, and then, okay, can I turn that into something new and interesting? Can I, was it a mistake, or did I learn something from it? You know, can I do something interesting and different in this scenario?
If I was playing with incomplete information, that would be one thing. But if all of the information is knowable and the incompleteness is based on the fact that I can know the information and still not understand what it means, that's where I have a problem. Like, if somebody has a hidden information about something that allows them to surprise me, great, I love it. But if it's just like, move this unit forward 4 inches and then turn it around, and I just don't know what moving a unit 4 inches looks like, that's where I struggle. That's where I feel really frustrated. Like, yeah, like playing Fire Emblem has had me super jonesing for more tactics games where I can, like, look at a situation and try and figure out, okay, what do I think is the best play? And I was thinking last night, boy, it would be great if I could play X-Wing, where I could sort of hover over all of my units and see, okay, what's this unit's movement dial look like? Where are the various areas that they could end up? And then use that bevy of information to sort of pick how I want to move my units for that turn.
Yeah, but, like, the thing you're describing there doesn't really sound like an issue of information. It's an issue of mastery. Like, it's familiarity with your pieces, whereas in Fire Emblem, it's just giving you all the answers right away. I don't know if that makes sense.
I tend to agree, and it's been my, like, perpetual issue trying to get into minis games, is there is a skill that minis players develop, which is knowing how much 12 inches is.
It's spatial reasoning.
And playing without, like, I don't know how to develop that spatial reasoning. Like,
that's how I feel about statistical analysis when you're looking at a magic card and say this card is bad in 2 seconds. It's the same thing, just different skill, but same concept.
What you're talking about is just application. Like you learn what 12 inches is by measuring out 12 inches hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of times. It's the same as like someone making a recipe. Like, I come from a long line of bakers that don't use recipes. They know that this is how much the appropriate amount of salt is, but only because they've done it thousands and thousands and thousands of times. So, like, you can't immediately know that if I pinch my fingers in this way and dip it into the salt, that will be the perfect amount to get the desired effect. So, I mean, like, all of the tricks that you're talking about with miniature gaming are just through repetition.
Yeah, I feel like with Magic, there are shortcuts of, hey, go look at what the best people are playing, and, like, you can watch some of them play and see how they're using it and sort of try and imitate them. But that's, like, I think the difference there is, I don't know how to imitate the spatial reasoning.
I can always describe it to you if you're interested.
I mean, but there is the equivalent of net decking in miniature gaming. It's basically looking at, what are the army lists that are most likely to succeed in situations and things like that, just like looking at decks that are succeeding.
But
that's why formations are valuable.
But that's sort of the brilliance of minis gaming, is that net decks are a lot less, like, net listing is a lot less important in them. It being able to, like, pilot the list is where most people say the skill is. And that's where it's like, I don't know how you provide somebody with, like, what's the quick way to get them into that competitive scene.
Yeah, but, like, I mean, the same would be true for Magic. Like, back in the day, if you gave somebody, well, like, say you're playing Vintage, and you hand somebody, like, $50,000 worth of a turbostasis deck without the explanation of how to run a turbostasis deck, they're not going to do very well. It is not a straightforward concept.
Oh, I agree with that.
I mean, or the other side of it, you have them watch 30 or 40,000 tournament games of people playing various decks and then tell them to go make a deck. They won't have the background necessary to make a deck necessarily, even if they know the mechanical rules of play inside and out.
Yeah, but again, I feel like making a deck and playing a deck are very different skills in Magic.
Yeah, I agree.
And the idea is that you can still have somebody who learns how to play the game, and sort of you can practice pretty quickly with a deck and they'll do okay. Like, this is how I got into competitive Magic back in college, is people around me were legacy players and were like, all right, we want you to learn. If you want to play, here's our deck and let me walk you through what cards you're doing, and here's, like, the cards you should be looking for and what's your game plan. And then we just sort of played games. But I was never trying to build a deck. I was just trying to learn how to play it. All of my deck building skills came from Limited, and as a result, don't actually translate terribly well into Standard.
But that was also the thing that you mentioned before, is one of the things that you thought was the, really compelling part of Magic is the deck building side.
I mentioned that.
I think you both mentioned it.
No. Like, playing Magic for me is very compelling. I absolutely love being like, going out and seeing, oh, this deck's competitive, let me put it together in Arena and go play a couple games and see how it feels.
I mean, and there are absolutely shortcuts to spatial reasoning in minis games. It's what formations are for. Like, you can put all of your models in a blob, in a whatever shape in blob, but the reason that you might shape them in a particular way or number a particular rank in a certain way is because that gives you a visual indicator of a measurement. You know the base sizes. 12 dwarves in a row is a foot. You now have on the board a marker for your own measurement use cases. And a lot of people play and are very careful about maintaining formations when they're learning measurement rules, because that lets them very, very carefully, it lets them estimate better.
And I feel like
that was
it also
absolutely a thing that I did.
I feel like it also helps to like measure parts of your body, like how much of my arm equals 12 inches, just so you have like a reference in front of you that like, oh, well, this is 12 inches. And I guess for me, like I wear a size 13 shoe, which is not terribly far off from 12 inches. So I looked at the board and like, what is roughly my foot on this board?
It's also why structurally most minis games don't, with some exceptions, but most of them try to avoid having first turn engagement, because that also gives you a turn to get spatial reasoning. But yeah, I mean, and one of the reasons that I'm so terrible at X-Wing currently is because I have all of the types of measurements that I'm doing I'm not familiar with. So I have no reference point for where exactly I'm going to end up the way I do with like a more linear game.
Yeah, I guess this just might not be necessarily a thing for me then.
Well, I mean, I think what it sounds like you're talking about with Fire Emblem is it is a game that gives you instant mastery, and you're just making decisions based on the data that it is giving you. Whereas with miniature gaming and even with Magic the Gathering, there is a certain learning curve that you have to pick up those skills on your own. Like there's no I mean, Google Glass isn't giving you like a heads up display of what all the available options are.
Oh my goodness, I wish it would so badly. That would be so cool.
I mean, maybe at some point. Like I still feel like Google Glass was a little ahead of its time.
It definitely was.
And a really awkward form factor for it, but like I'm ready for augmented reality to be a proper thing.
It was definitely what was the first like smartphone?
The Trio.
I was wondering if you're going back to the BlackBerry.
No, before that, I think it was like
Palm Trio was the first one I ever used. It was that same form factor as like a modern smartphone.
Yeah.
But it was like a good 2-3 years ahead of its time.
Yeah.
And it lacked it lacked really good software because the Palm operating system was never that amazing.
True
speaking
facts.
from someone who has actually written software for the Palm operating system.
Yep.
But yeah, Fire Emblem has definitely gotten... I know people have been recommending me a bunch of different games. Ash, what was the game that is like... So what I've been now jonesing for is a game that lets me do tactical dungeon delves. And this is, shockingly to me, something that doesn't really exist in video games.
There's a game that just finished Kickstarter called Solasta Crown of the Magister that should probably be out some point next year.
As far as, like, my cursory search has gone, other than that, it doesn't really exist. Like, the tactical roguelike.
I was going to say, most of the games that would be sort of in this genre are the roguelikes.
Yes. And I have been playing Tangle Deep. Because that was recommended to me. But, like, the idea of, hey, I've got a party of 4... Maybe they move around in formation, and then once combat's entered, let's go to a tactical, like, move around a square map and fight stuff, like you would in D&D.
So the old Gold Box games?
Turn-based.
I mean, the old Goldberg games were turn-based.
Yeah.
Were they?
Yeah, absolutely.
Are they so old that they would be miserable to play?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, probably, but I mean, they're like late 80s.
How do you feel about EGA graphics?
Yeah.
Why did this format die?
Baldur's Gate.
Yeah, Baldur's Gate. That's exactly why.
Okay, so the reason why this format died is because when the gold box era of game was popular, that was the highest level of fidelity that was capable on a computer.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't have real-time combat.
Yeah.
And once real-time combat was something that could be done, then they have full steam ahead. Like, turn-based combat was the past, and we're going to now do Diablo-style action RPG combat.
It's basically Divinity Original Sin, the first one, that has started turning that around recently.
Yeah.
And it's true, like, Divinity Original Sin is a game I definitely need to spend more time with. it's also very odd because I always feel like I don't understand why I spend as many orbs as I end up spending on any given action. But maybe I can get under the hood of that system and understand it.
Play the second game, it makes more sense.
This is 100% true.
Okay.
I actually really I feel like Divinity Original Sin hit for me the perfect balance between a high degree of information and still letting interesting and surprising things happen in combats that I then had to react to. That might be a function of my preferred playstyle.
I mean, when you have a build centered around making interesting things happen, interesting things will in fact happen.
It's true.
Sometimes they will go the way you expect, and sometimes they won't.
Don't stand in puddles.
Don't stand in puddles. Also, don't stand in lava.
That's just good advice generally.
It's true.
Unless you're cold.
I have to be
Even
real cold.
The speed run of that when they did it at GDQ of the first game involved taking a box filled with lava, cheating their way to the end of the game, and dropping this box filled with lava on the final boss. So they didn't have to actually fight him.
This is the kind of thing that I find delightful about this game, as well as a shockingly intricate tactical system.
Yeah. I've also been playing a lot of Fire Emblem Heroes as a result of this, which means I've now actually played a stamina-based game and kind of understand a bit more about it. Do all of these games try and one-up Warframe for the most complicated progression?
Yes.
Look, Warframe's progression is, I want to say, inspired by these games, but I'm not sure the timing is right.
I was gonna say, it feels like it's like, alright, so now that you've got your hero, you can, if you've got the right resource, you can upgrade your hero. How do you get the right resource?
I mean, have you heard us talk about upgrading things in Dragalia? Because it's similar stuff there.
Yep, that's madness.
Mm-hmm.
Go do 300 of this thing. And hope
Basically, all of these games have a convoluted progression system, at best.
Oh, God,
Okay.
yeah.
It was really funny,
I mean, I feel like with Dragalia Lost, if you're going to draw a diagram to explain how the upgrades work, there needs to be a John effing Madden in the middle of it.
That thing has the worst. My frustration with that one is more the UI is just hot garbage for it.
They've improved it somewhat, but yes, it's not good.
I would like Dragalia Lost so much better if I could play it with a joystick on the Switch. Because its combat fidelity is not amazing. But yeah, play Final Fantasy Record Keeper. It's honestly one of the more straightforward ones.
It's gotten levels and levels of complication added onto it over the years.
Yeah, but the base, there's a bunch of different kind of activities you can do, and they all have their own weird requirements. But
how many different things can you level up? And is the number less than 10?
Yes,
you can basically level up your characters and your weapons. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, you can level up heroes and weapons in this game as well.
Yes, but also there's skill inheritance.
There's also skill inheritance.
Oh, God. There is a portion of my brain dedicated to understanding that, and every time I defragment my hard drive, I think about it. Because I'm not sure it needs to be there.
I'm just saying, Warframe is approaching Disgaea in that you can level up weapons, and you can level up mods, and you can level up your Warframe, and you can level up your operator, and you can level up
yourself,
your enemy, so that they can drop better items, and you can level up your syndicates, and we're not at Disgaea levels yet, but we're getting pretty close.
You can level up your guild.
You can level up your guild. You can level up your guild's research.
You can level up the planets that you're on. Sometimes, 2 of them.
So
I'm saying most free-to-play games, even Dragalia, where you have levels of weapons and dragons and worm prints and heroes, they're not that bad.
So backing up just real quick, Brian, the very last Gold Box games are actually VGA and might be recent enough that you wouldn't hate them. By recent enough, I mean 1993.
Oh boy.
But they're on Good Old Games. $10 if you want to give it a try.
I might check this out.
They are very well thought of. It's the Dungeons and Dragons Dark Sun series.
Yeah, those are so good.
Yeah. How well they hold up, I could not tell you. I haven't played them in many years, but I loved them when I played them. And they do actually use, 16-bit graphics. You can still see individual pixels, but they're more than 16 colors at a time.
Brian, did you ever play Into the Breach?
No.
Oh, you would love that game. Really?
Yeah, that's
Oh,
what
yeah.
I'm thinking. It is.
Oh
it
my
is
God.
basically giant robots versus kaiju, and it
Build
is
machines.
by the people who made FTL. You build your machines, you add parts to your machines, and then you have a Advance Wars type interface that shows you what moves you can make and stuff like that.
Okay.
And you're building combos. You're trying to build the best combo.
That sounds fun.
And it's another game that's on Windows
Everything.
and Switch.
Yeah, this was a game that
It's on
absolutely,
everything.
I played this game. It is absolutely not for me, but I think you might love it.
Yeah, it just popped into my head.
The people that love it really, really love it.
I forgot about that game.
I'm surprised you didn't play this game.
Who,
Maybe
me?
you should play this game. Yes, you.
You should play that. You should
Okay.
play this game.
I mean, and is Wargroove the Advance Wars equivalent that's out now?
Yeah, Wargroove is just Advance Wars.
That might also
little
be a
different.
thing Brian would like. I don't know.
I consider me not having remembered to recommend Into the Breach for you as a failure of me as a friend. I should have done this years ago.
Yeah, because it's 2 or
It's
3
only
years
been out
old.
It came out in 2018, I think.
Oh,
It's
really?
not even 2 years old
It's
yet.
not that old. Yeah, February 2018. It is 2 years old. Almost.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to check it out.
I think we're butting up against time. Any parting thoughts?
Can't wait for Ori.
When is it releasing, and did it get delayed?
I'm not sure, and I think it did.
Okay.
It's coming out in February, so that's something to play in February.
Yeah,
Well, there
February
you
11th.
go.
This February?
Yes, this February.
For what?
Switch and PC.
Maybe I'll have something to do while I'm out of the country.
No, sorry. Xbox One and PC.
Yeah, it's an Xbox/Windows exclusive.
I got confused between... Oh, yes, and it did get delayed. It's March 11th now.
Okay.
I thought I got
So,
delayed.
if I'm going to go back and play more Fire Emblem, where do I go next?
To the 3DS.
Wow, that was an interesting noise I heard.
Wait, am I wrong?
No, you're right.
Yeah.
I was going to suggest a game that isn't Fire Emblem.
What game?
I don't know, but I'll think of something by the time you finish this one.
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot of Fire Emblem. If you want more Fire Emblem can be had if you're willing
It's
to crack
true.
open the 3DS.
Awakening is on the 3DS, and that's kind of what launched the modern Fire Emblem series.
Mm-hmm.
Awakening and the other one
Fates.
And Fates is on the 3DS. And Echoes is on the 3DS.
Yep, and Echoes.
But Echoes is a remake.
It's a remake,
Yeah.
yeah.
Fates had the hey, play it, and then do you want hardcore mode? Do you want to play on even fancier difficulty?
I mean,
With
Fates
New
had two
story attached
paths.
to it?
Fates did the Pokemon thing, except that one of those games was intentionally more difficult than the other.
Yeah. So you've got inherent replayability with more story. With more story to go with your upper difficulty setting.
But if you want more Fire Emblem, there are some games on 3DS. If you want to go further back, there was a series on the GameCube and Wii. And I'm going to assume that you don't have a GameCube or Wii around anymore, so you have to find those other means.
I'll have to find my 3DS, I think.
And prior to that would be, GBA, Super Nintendo, and Nintendo.
So,
But beyond the GBA, they're not translated.
I was gonna say, did the old ones get remade ever?
The
Yes.
second one is Echoes.
No,
I think it's the second one, isn't it? Yeah, it's a remake of Gaiden, which was the second one.
I think there are fan translations for some of the old ones.
there's a
Probably.
remake of the first one, but I think that might be on the original DS.
Yes, yeah, Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon was DS, and it was a remake of the very first game. So you don't have to go any further than back to 1994. Actually, I think that one got remade too.
I mean, Fire Emblem 3 is basically a remake of Fire Emblem 1,
Ah,
but the version
the third-
of that
The
didn't
third one
get
got
translated.
remade. Yeah, the third one got remade, but it's Japan only.
Quite frankly, people have mentioned how Three Houses feels like set up to remake the 5th game, or Genealogy of the Holy War, I guess it's the 4th game. So maybe that'll happen soon.
There's so much Fire Emblem.
So much Fire Emblem.
There's quite a
I
bit.
just want more 3DS era games to re-release on the Switch. Because I would really prefer not to have to care about where my 3DS is.
Yeah, I would love for that as well.
Anyway. Final thoughts? Since we had some final thoughts. Okay.
I think we're good.
Hopefully you enjoyed the show, and we will see you again next week. Good night!
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
See you.